Hey, thought I'd throw together my thoughts on the recent Marauders Multigun 2025 match held in Clinton, South Carolina. My top level summary of the match is that there were about 3 out of 10 stages that I thought were close to decent. Overall, I'd rate this match very, very low. The worst run major match that I participated in quite a while. I really don't say that lightly. I'm fully aware that a lot of the match staff will probably end up seeing this. These are solid people I think I have a lot in common with. I'm sure we'd get along great over beers or whatever, but I got to be honest and say that I won't be back next year, nor would I encourage anyone else to go to these in the future, barring some kind of dramatic, promising shift. Super quick aside for stage 1 in the background. This was one of my 3 favorite stages, but even saying that, it really could have been done better with some minor tweaks, like making one of the spinners a rifle target. I did like having a big movement section to the stage, though. The reason you're seeing me holding a bag at the beginning of all the stages is because that's where I was keeping my shooting badge. This match had a really dumb, poorly thought out, not enforced rule that you had to start with all of your gear on you for every stage. So the first huge red flag for this match was that 2 weeks before the match, after competitors had signed up, they'd paid, I think, $180, passed the refund window, booked travel, booked lodging, and taken time off work. It was announced that instead of the semi-standard time plus points with standard penalties that was used in years past, this year they're going to use one 5-minute penalty for everything in the match. That's a huge catastrophic penalty used by literally no other match I'm aware of. It's a huge penalty that encourages not doing your best and pushing your limits, but slowing way down and over-confirming every shot because a single penalty drops you out of the match. I think that this is part of why in my shooting group, my squad as it's called, was supposed to have 10 people in it, and instead it had just 6 of them show up. There were a lot of no-shows in our squads and others, so changing the rules of your game without any prior announcement 2 weeks before the match, that's just a huge dick move. And the rules they announced were a red flag to anyone who knew what they were doing. It's a sign to them not bother going to this one. And I think that shows in the results where I'd say there was one good shooter who showed up to this one. They did backtrack their 5-minute penalty to some still very extreme and fucking stupid 60-second and 30-second penalties, which I thought was funny, but it still just encourages the poor shooting I was just describing. Quick aside for stage 3 here. This was bad for a number of reasons. I was first. They wouldn't show me a dry run of the marathon targets moving their movement patterns, but everyone who wasn't first got to watch and learn what the movement patterns were. The targets were set for a random number of hits per target, but the same total hits. So some people had an easier job than others, that they had to get more hits on close targets. And worth mentioning here is that the monkey guy running the laptop for Marathon was a co-worker for one of my squad mates, and he decided to screw with his buddy on the first run-through on the stage by setting all the targets, the Marathons, to never go down. So after that shitter exhausted 60 rounds just to fail, they came up laughing to tell him about it, which is a dick move. You shouldn't pull that in a serious competition. But what makes it arguably worse is that this means that guy got a reshoot. His second time around, he did substantially better on the pistol part of the stage. So them being idiots like this chipped away at the competitive equity of the match. Back to regular match comments. Also announced in the email ahead of time was that they would be shooting out to 700 meters. It turns out they hadn't actually planned any stages when they sent that out. So I went and prepped to shoot long range, and I was pretty severely disappointed when the longest shot in the match was 350 yards, give or take. Literally half of what they announced. Kind of frustrating. Moving on to the stages in general, I think this match was pretty poor for several reasons. One was that almost every stage used very small shooting boxes the size of a hula hoop, like you're seeing here, as the only acceptable shooting area, which in addition to being boring, completely kills any stage planning. You must shoot from the script, right? You have to shoot target 1 from box 1, target 2 only from box 2, and so on. This is something that some very beginner-friendly matches do, but then pairing that beginner stage design with 60-second penalties, it's just the opposite of beginner-friendly. That's just kind of dumb. The stages also placed a much greater emphasis on pistol challenges than rifle challenges, which is to say that they weren't shy about putting very small pistol targets out there, but all of their rifle was extremely easy, pretty boring. And of course, 2 stages this year uses those dumb robotic Marathon brand targets. These are really dumb for competition. I strongly believe that they don't accurately detect hits, and they aren't consistent from shooter to shooter, so they just destroy competitive equity. Honestly, however, this match seems super keen on using them because they're a differentiator for this match versus other. I'm being serious when I say, though, that they have no place in competition where you're giving out prizes in the order of finish. Finally, another reason this match is just kind of dumb is that they decided to do 2 blind stages, stage 6 right now and 8, you'll see in a bit. This was a really dumb idea. Both of these stages were incredibly simple and neither one gained anything from being quote-unquote blind. And of course, they were only even potentially blind for the very first shooter in your squad, because as soon as they got done, everyone knew pretty much what the challenge was, and if they couldn't figure it out from just watching you, then they would be told in a few seconds anyway. So blind stages are just stupid, and on top of that, these stages gained literally nothing from being blind, aside from eroding even more of the competitive equity that was already really lacking in this match. Stage 8 was one of the blind ones. I made a dumb prep mistake here where I brought a half-full pistol mag in, and that's just a dumb thing that happens when you're trying to get ready quickly. It cost me an unnecessary reload, and I was a little slow getting through the spinner in general there. Once again, if you want to do well on those spinners, I advise bringing hot ammo because it really makes a difference. It's not my smoothest start to a stage, but I keep on moving, keep trying. I'm going to get ahead of myself here and talk about the next stage, stage 9, because I have a lot to say. I know there's a serious chance that the ROs from this stage will end up seeing this, so I'm going to try and be as dry and factual as I can. So this stage, stage 9, was very bad because the rifle portion was just 4 very big rifle static steel targets very close to one another, all about 250 yards away. Not like you're seeing me shoot now where I have to like turn 20 degrees between each target. It's really obvious which one I'm shooting at. 2 or 3 of these targets had their hit indicating flashers fall off. I didn't know that because I was the first shooter. You had to shoot these rifle targets left to right for the hits to count, and you had to do that twice. The primary and secondary ROs for stage 9, as you can see, they're just squinting with their version 1.0 eyeballs and doing their best to call hits. There was one RO who had a pair of his personal binoculars behind the shooter who was very clear that he was not the one responsible for calling hits. It was primary and secondary who were supposed to be doing that. My side of the story as to what happened on stage 9 is that I have a great scope. I'm braced up on a very secure surface at max magnification, aiming at the leftmost target. I can see all 4 targets in my scope at one time. I proceed to absolutely nail these targets, but I believe the ROs were just completely failing at calling the hits. I hit target number 2 twice in a row because they didn't call the first hit. I hit target 3 and 4 multiple times before I stop and literally ask them, why aren't you calling hits? And they're just confused and say, I think you're shooting the wrong target. I ask them what target they think I'm on. They say 4, so I shoot 4 again. We proceed to slowly get the ROs to actually call hits in the rest of the stage. After I'm done, I'm clearly pissed as hell. I ask them what's going on. They get real quiet, and I think they start to realize that they screwed up. It takes about a third of a second for the bullets that you're firing to even get to the targets, and another 2/3 of a second for the sound to travel back to the shooter. So my whole run, you can just hear hits ringing out all over the place, 1 second offset from my shots that they're just not calling. Again, the shot spotters are literally just squinting at unindicated static steel targets 250 yards away. What precedes is an uncomfortable conversation where I think the ROs put their feet in their respective mouths several times trying to get a story straight as to what they think they saw before they finally give up and say they aren't sure what they saw now, but in the moment they were pretty sure that I was hitting the wrong targets, which again, I am extremely sure I was not. They would not give me a reshoot unless I called the MD over, and they implied that the MD is going to side with their version of events and that this match is a run for charity, so I really shouldn't make a big deal out of it. I weigh my options, I take a deep breath, and I decide that the same MD that made all the other stupid decisions about this match that I've already outlined, where competitive equity just doesn't seem to be any kind of priority, probably won't see things my way. And I just swallow my pride and I walk away. The time that I spent arguing on this stage absolutely dropped me out of the top 10 final finishers for this match, and it definitely affected what prize I got off the prize table. But in the moment, I decided to move on. It is what it is. So my notes for improvement on this stage are pretty simple. There is no excuse not for there to be, it's a major match, right? There should be multiple optics-equipped shot callers on the stage like this, backed up by functioning hit indicators on every target. The ROs told me that the hit indicators broke and that there was no way to fix that, and that is so hilariously wrong. I'm not going to dignify that with a response. Another RO told me that I'm real good at calling hits, and I'm actually going to be nice in my response and say that, you know what? I'm sure you are good at calling hits. I've been doing this for a while myself, and if I'm honest, I'm pretty okay at calling hits. But if you put me 250 yards away from a static array of targets and tell me to squint real hard and call which one was hit, I would absolutely make mistakes too. And that isn't a knock on you. It's a knock against the stupid decision made by the match director to put you, the RO, in this position. For what it's worth, after my little hissy fit where they realized they screwed up but weren't going to back down because now they had kind of dug their heels in, on my squad of 6 shooters, they screwed up calling another hit and offered that shooter a reshoot. And they screwed up calling another hit but didn't offer another reshoot on a clearly audible hit. You know, it was like bang, ding. All right, fuck it, I'll just shoot it again then. Both of those shooters came to me afterwards to tell me about it, so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that these guys were batting 50% with my squad sample size of 6. Anyways, I've talked enough about this one. In conclusion, this match really got a lot worse from last year, and that's kind of sad. But for sure, I wouldn't recommend anyone do this one in the future. I don't think the results of this match mean anything. If the results say I beat you, I really didn't. And without competitive equity, this is all just slop. So to the MD, Chris, I'd like to politely point out that if you want to raise money for a charity, you don't need to have like a match with shot timers and stuff. You can just hold like an event with a demo area for vendors and some shooting off to the side for funsies and whatnot. You could probably actually hold a pretty fun little event with the gear and commitment that you put into this. So I really hope that that's an option you consider for the future.